In Star Wars, many of our heroes are riding a fine line between the light side and the dark. What actually qualifies as a good action that aligns you with the light and a dark action that aligns you to the dark? How do you know if you're actually doing the right thing or the wrong thing? Now, in Star Wars, it's easy because if your eyes start to turn yellow and your skin gets pasty, you're doing the bad thing. But we don't have such easy telltale signs in our world, and so we have had to come up with ways to understand this. Druidry has a nifty trick to help you with this, and it actually aligns quite well with the Jedi's idea of light and dark side. So let's talk about that as we walk together down Creation's paths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a Christopagan Druid and Priest of Brigid.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christopagan Druid and sous chef to the Dagda.
Today, we're going to be talking about the light side, the dark side. Is there a gray side? And how can we navigate these waters in our own life since we do not live in a galaxy far, far away? But before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever app you're listening to us on. We do 5 original Christopagan and Druid episodes Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss the thing. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up. And thank you to all of our new subscribers. We just had a huge boost to subscriptions on YouTube. Y'all are welcome, and we're so grateful that you're here. All right, let's just get into it now, shall we? The light side, the dark side. In Star Wars, I feel like this isn't so much about ethics as it is about morality. Or maybe it's the other way around. It really depends on the story.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with the writer involved in the particular status.
I think it's the situation more than the story, because the dark side cave, the question is, if Luke had not have brought a lightsaber in with him, would the dark side have followed him? Was the defiance of carrying a weapon in with him anyway what made him see the dark side in the cave? Was it something internal within himself? Was this an ethical or a moral dilemma that we see there? Is an interesting one, because Star Wars has a wonderful view of humanity, and by that I mean the sentient being that we are, that we're neither born good nor evil. And so I just want to point that out, because it's very situational. And yes, it does depend on the story, and the stories highlight different aspects of this, because it's a lot more nuanced than I think a lot of people think it is.
Yeah, I felt that was part of that test with the cave, was more going back to the simple code. By Luke bringing that weapon in, he's bringing fear with him in, being the first path down the dark side. That fear led to anger, which is when he lit that lightsaber to fight Vader. He was fighting in anger, and in hatred decapitated the Vader in the cave.
Am I hearing Yoda in the way that
you are hearing Yoda?
Yes. That fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering?
Yeah, and it was Luke's own suffering. I really think that was a big part of that test in that cave, that if he had gone in without the weapon, if he had gone in without the fear.
So here's my thoughts on this. The test is being done by Yoda, not the cave. Yoda wants to know what they see in the cave. And I get it. A lot of people have feelings about the sequel trilogy, and we're not here to litigate those feelings. But I think Rey's experience in her cave in The Last Jedi, where we see her going to the cave, I think illustrates what going into the dark side, going into the shadow self really is about. Because what we see is her longing. Her heart's desire is to be a part of a lineage. Because she does not know who her parents were or anything, or where she's connected to, we see her in a lineage that's just her. And they're all taking actions slightly off center. And she wants desperately to find out who she is. And then when she looks into the mirror wall and sees herself look back, it's showing her heart's desire. And this is why the Jedi teachings are rooted in non-attachment. And I would say that this is why Buddhism is rooted in non-attachment. All Luke knows right now is warfare. Ever since he escaped from the farm, ever since he escaped from the first Death Star, his life has been nothing but war. And even before that, he dreams of going off and being a hero. We know that he wants to go visit with his friends to pick up some power converters. In the extended version of that scene, which was filmed, and you can actually see it in a lot of the social features, it's even up on Disney Plus for you to see. And many people have uploaded it to YouTube, as well as it's in the novelization, and it's in the NPR radio version of Star Wars, which is a trip. Much of the cast actually came back for their roles, except for a couple key players. And it's a trip if you haven't heard it, but it's actually based off the shooting script, not the finished edited script. So there's actually a lot more in there. And we know that he's going to visit Biggs Darklighter, who was a friend of his, who went off to the Imperial Academy and joined the rebellion. And that this is what Luke is wanting to do. He's wanting to follow Biggs off into the rebellion. He's wanting to go off and be a hero. He wants to live in the bright center of the galaxy, not a place far off from it. And he's now experienced that by the time he goes into the cave. And we see him facing his fear. I am becoming Vader. I am just a machine of war. That's the fight that he sees within himself. Druidry reminds us that all of our actions are rooted not only in our personal sovereignty, but in our interreactions with the sovereignties of others, including the sovereignty of the land, the creatures that we interact with, the sovereignty of the earth, sea, and sky, and the various spirits that live there. It sees the world as a complex web of sovereignties that have overlapping and mutually inclusive and mutually exclusive needs, wants, and desires. And the best thing to do is to honor life. You only take the steps required to achieve your aim. You don't go beyond that. So, for example, here we have our hero trying to figure out what to do. A wolf is coming after you. Do you fight the wolf and live, or do you just surrender to the wolf and let the wolf consume it? The wolf's desire is to eat. The wolf needs to eat to survive. There's a possibility if you fight the wolf, one or both of you might die. I don't want the wolf to eat me, and it is not unjust for me not to want to be eaten by the wolf, right? Or if the wolf is going after my livestock. So the sovereignty of the wolf compared to the sovereignty of the population, the cattle, sheep, whatever the wolf may be going after, or myself and my family. In my best estimation, I live in the mutuality that's wants the wolf not to get something to eat right now. So I'm going to fight the wolf. It's about taking this entire web into consideration. How does it affect not just me, but the entire situation? And that really is something a lot of times in a situation like that, we can judge instantly. What if something's stolen from you? We have a wonderful story of the Dagda going to retrieve his harp that was stolen. Mm-hmm. After the second battle of Mortoy, Brecht and the Fomorians steal a lot of things as they're leaving. One of them is the harp of the Dagda. Now, the Dagda, mighty warrior, has his weapon with him, which is a staff, a stick, that if he hits somebody with it and they're alive, they die. If they hit someone with it and they're dead, they come back to life. Literally the power of life and death in his weapon. He brings with him Oma, one of the strongest, most powerful, most capable warriors of the Tua, and Lu, the other most powerful warrior within the Tua. They go to the island. Do they exact revenge? Do they murder everyone there? You love the story too. What happens?
No, they go there and he gets his harp and he puts them all to sleep and leaves. There's a little bit of resistance in the procurement of the harp, but that's mainly enemy soldiers that didn't get out of the way. He didn't seek to strike them down. The harp struck them while flying into the Dagda's hand.
He just walks in and raises his hand and the harp flies to his hand. And he plays a song of celebration and everyone dances. He plays a song of sorrow and everyone weeps. And he plays a song of sleep and everyone falls asleep. They could rid themselves of their enemies right now. Yeah. They're all in a magical sleep, but they came to the island to get his harp. They have his harp. They leave. It is just the right amount of action. This is their island. He has no interest in this island. There's no reason for him to take this island. His sovereignty has no place here. He got what was taken from him. He has restored back to himself what was taken, and then he leaves. This idea of restraint is what I would correlate to the Jedi idea of detachment, because he had every right to be angry. He had every right to want revenge in this moment. They just fought a bloody war. In fact, this happens after this second battle of Mochoi, right? This is the second battle. They fought a first one and a second one. He has every right to want to exact revenge, but he doesn't, because it's not within his needs. It doesn't serve anything. It just keeps the cycle going. And remember, the Dagda is, after all, Lord of the Cycles. It's the strumming of the Dagda's harp that turns the season from summer to fall, from fall to winter, from winter to spring, and from spring to summer. That is the power, the sovereignty that was taken from him. It's not merely that a personal possession was taken.
I think that's something to keep in mind, because when your actions are an act of revenge from a source of revenge, you are setting up a cycle of revenge, which means as the cycle turns, the person you're exacting revenge upon, or their party, their reaction or their action in the next step of that cycle is revenge upon you. It just feeds itself over and over again as each party is revenging for the previous revenge. And we could see this happen over and over again in history, where warring factions got to the point where they were just revenging for the previous revenge. And most have forgotten what the initial incident was. And it's only about the revenge. And it is entirely a cycle of suffering on all parties.
And this is why we always say that it is important for us to always act, never to react, to learn as best as you can, to stay your reaction, to hold your reaction in and choose the action that you take afterwards. This to me is the difference between the light side and the dark side. And you can see this with some very interesting characters like Asajj Ventress in Star Wars. When we first meet her in the Clone Wars, she is a creature of pure instinct. If she's mad at somebody, she attacks. If she likes somebody, she leaves them alone, maybe laughs at their joke, but she does not get close to them. If she wants something, she takes it. She is always in a state of reaction. We can see this with the Emperor. We can see this with Darth Maul. We can see this with all of the dark side figures that we have here. They're in a state of reaction.
Even Dooku, because everyone wants to be like, well, Dooku is leader and stuff, but the entire genesis of that path was a reaction to the injustices and slights that he was seeing around him that led to him reacting over and over again to everything else. And as people started acting against him, he just reacted more.
And his final turn to the dark side was his reaction over the death of his disciple, Qui-Gon Jinn. It's in this moment that he truly turns to the dark side. In his grief, in his pain, he kills another Jedi Master and completes his fall.
He was just reacting to the situation. He was caught and was left with either accepting being caught and maybe trying to rehabilitate himself.
He was in a state of fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah, a state of reaction.
And at that moment, he could have joined with Master Yaddle and fought the future Emperor. And who knows how that would have turned out. Or he could side with the future Emperor and fight Yaddle with him. He had a moment. Who do I fight? Who is my enemy here? And he acts out of gut instinct. We see this with Anakin as well in the Revenge of the Sith. This action-reaction choice is the difference between a Jedi acting in the light side and the dark side. Remember what Yoda said? The Force is used for knowledge and defense, never to attack. Jedi does not use the Force to attack. We see, as Jedi are getting nearer and nearer to the dark side, them acting violently with the Force. They're attacking with it. They're not using it defensively. They're not using it to aid in the protection of others. They're using it to strike out, to lash out. This is why we only see Sith use Force light. It is using the Force for attack. And it's always in a moment of reaction. You can see it in Revenge of the Sith in that wonderful moment on Ian McDermott's face when he realizes, oh, I've got Anakin. He's on my side. And his reaction is to shout the word power while hitting Mace Windu in the face with Force lightning. He sees it. He sees the moment. He reacts instinctively. All of his actions are out of this instinctual place. They are not thought through. And that really is, in so many ways, the difference between the light side and the dark. Andor is exploring this in so many interesting and nuanced ways. And we're not going to get into all of that. If you want us to do a future miniseries, maybe for Star Wars Month next year, or maybe later this year, we can go through the ethics of Andor because it's fascinating to see.
That's what was so amazing. In the Acolyte, they really explore this between what actions is light and dark, where you have one sister, she goes around and murders several
She
Jedi.
begins in a state of pure instinct.
Her actions were still from a point of grief and not, she said she wanted to do it in revenge, but it was really in grief, because once she realized her other sister was still alive, that grief was sated and she was done with her quote unquote vengeance path. And this is also why she was unable to bleed a blade. You really have to give into the dark side to make a lightsaber red. It's actually part of the process for an acolyte to become fully give into the dark side. And it's her sister in reacting in hate and rage when she truly is able to bleed the blade and in a moment of reaction.
It is a powerful, devastating moment.
Devastating moment.
And it can be tricky for us to learn because we want rules. And the hardest thing for us to learn as we grow up is that rules are not entirely helpful with navigating life. Like, we can sit here and talk about the 10 Commandments, because this come up a lot when people are talking about the ethics and morality, right? How many times are you going to be in a situation where you have to ask yourself, is this a thou shalt not kill moment, right? Hopefully none of us are living in a place or in a situation where do I kill someone or not becomes a regular thing we have to deal with. That's a probably never in your life situation, hopefully. So Jesus expands this out and says, if you've ever been angry with somebody without cause, you've murdered them. If you've ever not tried to make amends, you've murdered. Now, is he saying being angry is the same as murder? No, he's trying to take you beyond just this, well, I've never killed anybody, so I'm fine. Have you slandered someone? Paul says that to slander somebody is to murder their reputation. It's taking us out of the rules. The rules are not, they're guidelines. They're there to teach you how to do something. They're like learning a form when you're learning how to fight. You're probably not going to use that exact form in an actual fight, but it's teaching you the motions. It's teaching you how to do blocks and attacks and what have you, so that you know the basics of what you're doing.
A method I found helpful to help some understand this is I just like to ask the question, how often do you actually walk on the sidewalk? Do you stay within the parameters of the sidewalk? And how often do you veer off into the grass or into the street? You know, the sidewalks are like the rules. It's a path that's easily set out with clearly defined lines. Here's how you stay on the sidewalk. Most of us don't always walk on the sidewalk, and sometimes there is no sidewalk to even follow for our path. Not wrong to not be on the sidewalk. Sometimes you have to walk into the street. Sometimes you have to go into the grass. Like I said, sometimes you have no path at all and you've got to carve your own path, but that doesn't make it right or wrong. It's a matter of what's in your heart. And are you taking action or are you reacting?
It's also the nature of the action you're doing. We did an entire episode on the ethics of hexing, but a lot of people want to say that hexes are always wrong. Coming from an Irish perspective on this, which we tend to do, that's part of justice making. If something or someone is standing in the way of justice, that something or something has to be removed. Hexing is a moral imperative at that point. Not doing it, not trying to remove that obstacle to justice is more of a moral failing than doing it. Now, do you hex everybody willy-nilly? You just walk around, a plague on you, plague on your cow? No, you don't do that. That would be bad because, again, you're interfering with the sovereignty of others. The only time we interfere with sovereignty is for justice, for fearing, for truth, when we are actually working for that basic good. And so when we are working for justice, it is often appropriate to do a hex. That does not make it evil. Now, if every time somebody slights you or makes you angry, you're hexing them, that sounds like a reaction to me, not a deliberate action. If you're seething and stewing in anger, you're still in a reactive state.
And you're living in that wrong relationship with yourself at that point. Because if for no other reason, you need to let go for yourself, because all that cortisol is only killing you faster.
Because what the Jedi get wrong in their understanding of ethics is that they equate possessiveness with attachment. They equate relationships with attachment. Now, yes, relationships can become codependent. They can become toxic. And so they want to prevent that from even being a possibility. So we make a rule. No attachments, no deep relationships, only friendships at best. We don't go any further.
That's where they could have done a better job teaching that right relationship. If Anakin could have learned that, yes, it's okay to love Padme and to be in a relationship with Padme, but when you possess her as an object, when you're trying to prevent the natural course of things from happening, that's living in wrong relationship, not only with Padme, but with the universe around and life and how life operates. So the people live and die.
To go into what Yoda says, always emotion in the future is, what Anakin was actually seeing was the results of his own actions. If he continued to have this possessive ownership over her, he would kill her and she would die. But he didn't see any of that because he was blinded to his own part in it and thus brought it about because he's not reacting. So he's only reacting. He's not acting. He's living in this reactive fear. We have to be very mindful about that. What the Sith get wrong is their creed begins with, there is only passion, which means whatever you want, whatever you feel, whatever you desire, you should just grab. You don't have to worry about consent or agency. You don't have to worry about the sovereignty of the others. They're operating from a place of greed, of envy, which are all reactive places. If you see something and you go, I want that, and take it, that's a reaction, not an action.
It's a very solipsistic place. Yes. The relationship is fouled because there's no consideration of another.
This is what they both get wrong in their ethics. This is why Yoda, as glib as it sounds sometimes to say do or do not, there is no try. Try is about living in this reactive space. That's really the real secret of do or do not, there is no try. I've decided to do this. I've decided not to do this. If you say, I'm going to try to do this, you're saying, I'm going to push until it gets too hard and then I'm going to stop. I'm going to try until it's too difficult and then I'm going to stop. You're allowing yourself to live in this reactive space.
You're only trying in the first place because you were pushed into this choice.
It could be that too. It's with anything. Yeah. Even when you make the choice and say, I am going to try, all you've said is, I'm going to put myself into a reactive state, because that's all it is when we're trying. You either do it or you don't do it. Now, you can do something and then decide this was the wrong thing and stop doing that. That's called personal growth. I wish more people did that. And that's fine. But living in the state of trial and error, this testing mode of, I'm going to try, I'm just going to see, oh, it's too hard. Or, oh, it's more than I thought it would be. Living in a place where you're just like, I'm just going to set my default mode to reaction. Well, of course you're not going to succeed, because sometimes to get to your goal, you have to push harder than you think you can push. Sometimes you have to discover resources within yourself that you don't even know are there. If you're living in pure reaction, the reaction is, well, I'm now in fight, flight, or freeze. So I'm either going to get nasty about it, I'm going to just freeze and stop, or I'm going to run away. And that's why trying is not the answer. And that really is the heart of what Yoda is trying to teach there. This is the heart of a real, true ethic in way to live our lives. Because in having to do or do not, there is no try. You have to take the concerted effort to decide, is this a thing to do? Is this a thing not to do? In that consideration, you take into effect all the things we've talked about, the sovereignty of others, the fear and the truth of the moment. Is this a thing that is even possible right now? Discovering the theory of gravity is something that people have already kind of done that. So there's no point in trying to do it again. Trying to find the theory of levity. Well, we've kind of proven there is no force of levity, even though Galileo thought there was. We've shown that it's not a thing. So trying to prove something that we know is not possible also is an issue, right? So in this discernment period that we take before action, we are honing ourself, our skill, and all of the things that we will need to start out on the track. And we do the smart things of giving ourselves guide stones along the way to know when we're going off the path, when we need to turn, when we need to refuel, when we need to regenerate and repower. We're taking it all as a conscious action.
It is really important also to keep in mind that it is a cycle, that once you've chosen to take that action and put yourself on that course, like everything in life, it is a cycle. It's going to come back around and you're going to have to make that choice again, which is why you have to understand and see how insidious the whole flip-flopper BS that comes up around changing one's mind. Because to be faced with that choice again, which will happen multiple times when going down a path, and to just concede to continue down the path because you've already made that decision, you have now turned your opportunity of choice of action into a reaction. You are now reacting to your initial decision rather than choosing to continue the action that you've done. Each time that cycle comes up, it's an opportunity to reevaluate.
Isn't it funny how this always comes back to agency?
It always comes back to agency.
And that's really the morality that is at play in something like a Star Wars and something that Druidry is all about. When we talk about truth, we're not talking about, is grass green? Because you know what? To some people, grass is not green. My brother is blue-green colorblind. Grass is not green to him. And that's not even something worth arguing over. When we talk about truth, we're talking about the state of things as they are and being constantly aware of how things are. That's truth. I live in a particular city at a particular time during a particular moment. There are certain particular things that are true about who is in charge of the city. What are the police like here? What is the crime rate like here? What is the governmental structure like? Who are my neighbors? Who are the people that I interact with in this community? All of this is what we mean when we say true. It's this web of relationships that make up the truth of living. Now, we can have opinions layered on top of that truth, but no matter how much I want to say the person who is the mayor of our town is not the mayor, yeah, I didn't vote for him, but he's still the mayor. And I have to live in that reality and that truth because he is still the one in power. And recognizing that ground truth is the starting point. And then understanding the sovereignty of myself and others, the sovereignty of the community, how our agency interacts with each other, and how through mutual aid and support, we will make it through all of the craziness that happens here. It sounds like a lot, and it is harder than just having a series of rules you can tack on a wall. But the problem with that series of rules, and I mean this, even if you go to the full 613 mitzvah in the Mosaic Law, you take all 613 of them, they don't cover every situation you could ever be in. You're going to have to do interpretation and do the work and figure it out yourself. So even if you have all 613 rules laid out in front of you, you're still going to have choices that you have to make. All relying on rules does is make us dependent on an interpreter to tell us what these rules mean in the situation I'm in. And we abrogate our sovereignty to another. I'm not saying don't study the rules. I'm not saying some rules are okay to live by. There are many rules that I live by, but I do so consciously. And I know that while they may be guidelines, they're not going to tell me what should I have for dinner tonight. I'm still going to have to make decisions. What should I do for work tomorrow? I'm still going to have to make decisions. Don't relinquish your sovereignty either to another individual, to a group, or to just blindly reacting to the world around you. Your sovereignty, your agency is the most important thing that you have, and you need to own it and learn how to live in the mutuality of community for the betterment of us all. And that sometimes means the systems have to change. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope we've helped you understand this light side, dark side thing. If you need it really simply stated here at the end, the dark side is anytime you rob agency from yourself or others. The light side is when you act out of your own agency in mutuality with others. I would love to know your thoughts. If you're listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, or CreationsPaths.com, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, if they say you can leave a comment, they don't let us know, so we will not see it. You can leave a comment there anyway if you want to, because engagement is magic. And then go to CreationsPaths.com, click on chat, and you can leave a comment there. While you're there, if you have a few dollars you can pass our way, we offer monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am CE Dorset on both. Or you can support us using the Cash App hashtag CreationsPaths. Thank you to everybody who does that. It really does help us out. It helps us keep the lights on, keep a roof over our head, and food on our table. If we've ever said anything that's helped you out, please share it with others. That helps us out more than you could possibly know. Alrighty. And as we're heading out, brace yourself, everyone. Oh, great Morrigan, goddess of sovereignty, prophecy, and magic. Help us to divine the paths that we should go and to see the paths and the actions that we should. Guide us in strength so that we may live in our own sovereignty while respecting the sovereign borders of others, so that we may be strong and true and build a faithful community for the truth and betterment of all, in justice always. Amen.
Amen.